everybody for joining us today. I'm here with my friend Evgeny J. Tachuk. Jay is with Security Service Federal Credit Union. I had an opportunity to interact with him where he spoke to me about digital transformation. And it wasn't just oh, you need a pretty website. He actually took it into a lot of detail. What I loved about his presentation was how he put together everything into three circles of luck, of influence. And basically, he started talking about how you should address each circle of influence. I requested Jay to share his thoughts with all of us. And if he was kind enough to put it into a presentation, Jay, I'll allow you to please share a little bit about yourself. And with that, you can start the presentation as well. Tell us about where you come from and what you've done, please.
Thank you, Sandeep. Glad to be talking to you. Sure. So I was hired by Security Service almost 12 years ago to build their online channel at that time, digital channel now. So I've been doing that for over a decade and walk the path. Obviously, as I'm trying to be as truthful to what I'm saying as possible, right? In terms of my actions. My background is in high tech. I worked for Apple and AMD prior to joining the credit union. So I went through that cultural shift as well, going from a very, two top digital companies to a very conservative credit union. That's been a very interesting journey ever since. So I've been driving the innovation and digital transformation, or one of the leaders of the digital transformation of the credit union for a decade. It's been I've learned a lot of lessons. So this presentation we're going to go over demonstrates kind of like what I have learned. That the transformation is way beyond just the digital channel, which is sort of the veneer on top of everything, right? If you find yourself in a situation where you have to go deeper and all the way down to the core, that's where the real value is. And that's where in doing that will allow you to accomplish your goals and ensure the survivability of your institution long term, right? So why did I call it three circles of luck? Because we'll find ourselves in circumstances due to competitive pressures or external influences or whatever that may be. If you're lucky, right, just superficially, you're going to be dealing with just the digital feature sets and mobile apps and that. But with every new increased circle of luck, the deeper you go, the more impact you have on the operations of your financial institution, credit union, right? And the greater value you're going to return to your membership, not only in the near term, but also long term. And to your employees, because their employee experience is going to improve that much. They will not be dealing with multiple systems at the same time. They will have modern, sophisticated CRMs and other middleware layers or solutions that will allow them to provide answers to your membership that much faster, cleaner, right, and service their needs in a way that are competitive in this day and age. So let's dive into the presentation about the digital transformation and what I call the three circles of luck should you find yourself in one of them. So before that, let's take a look at the current landscape. So there's some good things that happened last year. The deposit balances rose 6.5%, although it was still down from the year before. The real estate loans grew 9% last year, which is phenomenal. So we did very well on average, and the saving balances rose 8.2%. So overall, the 2019 was good for business. However, obviously the pandemic happened, so now we're all in uncertain territory, and a recession is looming. how it all plays out is still to be seen. On the more worrying side, the member satisfaction continues to slide, which is unusual. Last year was the first time when banks beat credit unions in member satisfaction. What's driving that is still to be identified. And again, all the trends have been scrambled due to the pandemic, but I'm sure that by the end of this year, we'll figure this out. And it also became clear that the banks, especially the biggest bank, the top 20, are much better at attracting the younger generations due to the technological divide and the herd mentality. Younger people tend to do what other people in their cohort are doing, and the great feature sets that the top banks are offering in the digital space, especially mobile, are definitely attracting these generations because they're digital natives. So there are also three main factors that are affecting us as an industry in terms of dealing with the digital transformation. Fatigue of the last and the current recession. Some credit unions have just recovered from the crisis of 2008, and now we're diving into the next one. So just dealing with this crisis mode has been extremely taxing on many credit unions, especially the small to medium ones. The regulatory pressure, compliance is always an issue, especially when you're dealing with something as difficult as digital transformation. A lot of the regulations are vague. So you have to follow the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and taking risks in this space is dangerous. But also it makes partnerships with fintechs that much more troublesome and just difficult to accomplish. And of course, there's the competitive pressure. The top 20 banks have grabbed a lion's share of the younger generation and of the accounts in general. But we're not only competing against them, we're also competing against the fintechs, the upstarts, the challenging banks. So all of that is adding to drive the general fatigue of the digital transformation efforts across the leadership of the credit union industry in general. So what should you not be doing, especially at the moment, right? Do not chase the new shiny. And by that, I mean, do not try to compete with the top 20 banks on their turf, trying to match them feature by feature. You do not have the budgets, you do not have the technical resources, the odds are not in your favor. You can't win this. So what should you do instead? Well, what you should do instead is, if you find yourself in the situation, and thus you are in the third circle of luck, basically just focusing on the digital space, is figure out why your members are your members. What is special about you that made them come to you and not your competitors? Do field studies. Ask people what their needs are, and figure out what they actually need versus what they want. So for instance, we did this field study last year across 3 of our markets, and we figured out, surprisingly, that the gig economy was far more pervasive in Utah than it was in Texas. And also Utah members tend to be far more competitive in financial matters than the Texans are. So the cultural difference was something that we did not account for to that degree. We just simply were not aware of it until then. And we had plans in motion to start considering a few things before the pandemic hit. So now it's obviously we have more pressing issues to deal with, but it's something that we will return to once the crisis passes. Obviously, focus on the bottom line, especially that's valid. That's a valid point, no matter what whether it's a crisis time or not, but especially now, right? Figure out what is making you money, what is profitable, who are profitable. Focus on origination, removing the friction from your digital channel, which is surprising how many credit unions either don't offer online origination at all or mobile origination at all. Or if they do, they just deploy whatever vendor provided without really kicking the tires and understanding what type of friction that particular solution has. So we did focus on origination throughout the years, and at the moment we have a blended conversion rate of 34.5%, which is excellent. I think compared to the industry standard rate of 2%. So, however, even we are not there yet. We're not a true digital credit union. There is still a lot of offline and back office processes that need to take place. So right now we're focusing on automation. We had sort of moved to the next circle of luck, and I'll explain that when we get there. But definitely a look at automating the simplest repetitive tasks that your back office personnel is performing. And also, if you haven't invested in knowledge management, do so. Knowledge management allows your phone agents and your branch personnel, or anybody else in the organization for that matter, to quickly find a particular procedure that they're looking for that tells them what to do. And that may shave up to 30% of their time looking for an answer. So it is definitely a worthy investment if you're there. So at this particular level, when you're focusing on digital, there's quite a few hyped up tech trends that exist that you should ignore at the moment. So for instance, building your own chatbot. So conversational AI is a very complex new modality, and that you should definitely invest in, but get it from a vendor that knows their space and knows what they're doing, because it does require a lot of babysitting and nurturing. It does require investment in resources that understand this space, understand natural language processing and understanding, as well as user experience. It took us a year to deploy our first virtual agent, virtual assistant to the site. And although it has performed admirably, it took us that long, and we did get it from a vendor. So building your own when you just get either Amazon's or Google's or somebody else's framework, and you have to map it out all yourself, unless you have the resources, of a top 20 bank, is just unrealistic. Same thing with voice banking. Voice conversational AI is definitely has reached adoption or commonality now with Alexa and Google and Siri. However, the banking adoption through this channel is just not there yet. There is perception of mistrust, the cumbersome user experience. You have to ask Alexa to ask, Alexa ask security service for, balance. It just takes too long. It's just simpler to just pull up your phone and take a look at it with 2 taps. So the user experience is not there and the trust is not there. So right now is really not the time to invest in voice banking. P2P or person-to-person payment. So unless you already provide this this feature, it is not the time to deploy it. Zelle has made a lot of splash recently. They have grown the network admirably, but it takes a lot of capital and a lot of resources to deploy this functionality to market. Especially now, it's probably not the time. This use case has been solved, right? Yes, maybe your member will not be able to do it through you, but those people that actively use P2P have figured it out. They're going to use Venmo or Square Cash or even PayPal, and they're going to get around your limitations and they're going to get this done. Investing hundreds of thousands of dollars and multiple technical resources into this program at the moment, in my mind, is would be a misstep. Simply because you have right now in this crisis, all of our technical resources are stretched. I bet you have much better use cases to apply them to than this one. So let's move on to the second circle of luck, which is the middleware layer. So if you find yourself here, consider yourself lucky. You have moved on from just looking at digital, and you actually are moving into the real digital transformation. So what does this mean? Well, here is where you focus on your data and machine learning capabilities. You establish the top KPIs that you simply cannot track today. For instance, do you know who is the most profitable segment of your membership in terms of checking or personal loans or mortgage? If you have legacy products, what is the cost of maintaining them? Is there true business needs to keep them up? Can you calculate the lifetime value of your member or member segments? So all of these things are important for your long-term health as an organization. And to do that, you're going to have to take a deep look at how your data is structured, managed, and governed across the organization. So you're going to have to establish the organizational vertical for data management with capable leadership who understands the best practices and frameworks on how to deal with fragmented data, especially coming from many legacy systems, and how to convert that to actionable insights that actually propel your bottom line upwards. While you're doing that, now we live in an age of machine learning. This will be the great time to seed the machine learning talent across the organization, especially in the call center, risk, payments, and other, IT, obviously, other data-rich environments, simply because it will that much amplify the impact of the centralized data management structures you're investing into, and speed, introduce efficiency that provides speed to market. So this is obviously with every level we go to, the risks are higher. So this one is riskier than the digital one, but it is absolutely necessary to get a handle of how your business is actually performing and what you need to do to achieve the long-term profitability in this environment and going forward. And if you're really lucky, really lucky, and there's only a few of you that will find yourself in this situation, you will find yourself in the first, the central layer of the digital transformation, the very core, your core banking system, the API layer, and the technical architecture in general. If you find yourself in this circumstance, then I definitely recommend that you consider migrating from the legacy on-prem type course to real-time microservices-based architectures such as Finextra or Temenos. It will allow you to create new products or new payment mechanisms without going through very large testing and validation procedures like full regression against your entire core banking architecture. Simply because it will allow you to be far more nimble and agile in your approach to dealing with the market circumstance and what is happening in your competitive landscape. So definitely invest into a robust modern API layer, which will allow you to easily or easier build partnerships with fintechs and other credit unions. Or PUSOs, simply because that's the future. Europe has already shown us that this can be done. This can be done well, and it will allow you to succeed and basically be more agile than your competition. And if you succeed in this digital transformation efforts, it will position you for rapid growth. So Randall Brooks, that I mentioned here, is actually one of our main competitors in the San Antonio market. And they have been a very interesting case study to observe. They went through a very painful core conversion. It took several years. They had to switch mid-flight to another provider. There was an exodus of C-level leadership, which obviously is not a great thing to watch, and they think, yeah, I want some of that, but nobody does. But upon the completion of this journey, their growth accelerated multiple X. They have been able to multi-thread very large IT endeavors, such as data warehouses and payments and whatever they had to do. It's definitely it makes them a very capable competitor, and makes it very interesting to compete against them now. Right now that they are on the other side of this very painful process. Now, obviously, I hope that your journey is not going to be as painful and as theirs. But if you find yourself in a situation where you have to consider core upgrade or replacement, there has never been a better time to do so. So that's basically what I have, and now I'm ready for your questions.
Jay, thank you so much. You shared a lot of good information with us, and I made notes. So I'm going to start from the beginning. In the beginning, you shared a very good and interesting anecdote. You have young people who keep saying that they will bank with organizations that are behind a purpose, that they are green, they will transact with all of that. Yet with all the purpose that supports credit unions, you still find millennials going and working with banks. And the reason they go with banks is because banks offer them some sort of technology edge. What are some of those features that you feel attract that younger millennial to bank with a larger organization?
Well, it's basically the lack of friction, or the lesser degree of friction, right? The millennials and Gen Z haven't grown up in a digital world, have gotten used to having as little friction as possible in anything they do digitally. They just don't have the patience to allow for some sort of an offline process, or waiting for 24 hours to get a response from any sort of digital interaction. It's all about immediate gratification. So when you're dealing with solutions provided by, let's say, Bank of America, or Chase, or Capital One, I mean, they have integrated rewards that flawlessly, natively flow from their banking experience into their reward partnerships, for instance. They have Erica or Uno in Capital One case that do transactional, actually conduct transactions on the user's behalf. So all these things just fit like puzzle pieces into the experiences that this cohort has gotten used to. Even though I bet that most of them don't use the entire feature set, they just like it to be there, just in case, right? They have grown up in the world of Apples and Googles and Amazons, where everything is available, even though they probably don't use the majority of the features. They just want to know that it's there. There's also two other factors that play in this. Number one, they're not familiar with money. Like all of us in that stage in our life, we did not know much about finances. We did not know how to organize our financial lives, right? And this, these guys are not no different than us in that stage of our development. So they not knowing that, they don't understand that how the banks feed them and live of that, right? How that the credit unions are far more beneficial to their financial well-being than a typical bank would. So they just don't understand that. And there's also the herd mentality. And what I mean by that is, somebody just by shit inertia is gonna sign up for an account with the big bank because their branches are everywhere, right? They're on campus, they're on campuses, and when their friends ask them, okay, well, what do you have? Well, I have this, and being a very busy young minds, swamped by flows of information coming at them from every angle, they simply do not want to dedicate any bandwidth to figuring out what else is out there. They're just going to go and do the same thing, right? It's easier. This is the path of least resistance, and that's what's going to happen. So that's why and the great banks, the big banks, they have done a great job, fitting that mental model. Go ahead.
Okay. Jay, a question I want to ask also and bring up is that you talk about need versus want. Siddharth, I'm going to go again with that question. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
that's
okay,
okay, because your voice had cut a little, so
okay,
you can
so
ask two questions.
again, so you can edit this. So you talk about focus. You talk about focusing on what they need versus what they want. Young minds get enamored by all the available technology, but yet if we focus in on what they need, and you brought up one very good point, the fees. The fees require no technology, it's just education. So can you talk about don't chase the new shiny and elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. So what I mean by that is, look, there's every week, there's probably multiple articles that come out, Royal Bank of Canada has done this, Bank of America has done that, Capital One has released this new amazing feature on their mobile app, right? And all that stuff is great. It moves the industry, as a whole forward, right? However, your typical credit union simply doesn't have the budget or the resources to compete with those guys at that level. So we, for instance, literally 2 miles up the road from USAA, we cannot compete with USAA at their level. We simply, it's not possible, right? They're multiple X bigger than we are. They have 3,000, IT personnel compared to our couple hundred. So it's not a feasible thing to do. So you have to fight smartly, right? You have to figure out what your strengths are and apply it to their weaknesses. You have to figure out what makes you special, what problems, real problems your membership has that you can solve better than anybody else. Basically, figure out what niches, there's probably more than one, you play at that basically makes you, creates your killer app, if you will, when applied to your membership. So, like I mentioned, the gig economy in Utah. Well, that's a very particular type of need that we did not really cover, right? For instance, they need sort of bridge loans, right, between being paid. They need particular type of digital banking features that really nobody provides at the moment, outside of the couple of challenging banks, because it's new. So you have to figure out what makes you unique and what your membership actually needs. Listen to their listen to their pain points. We actually went into people's homes and watch them kind of manage their financial lives, and watch listen to their commentary. And it's those comments that drove the actual insights. I mean, yeah, we got a lot of feedback about the quality of our digital feature sets as well, and user experience, and it was great. But it is the stuff that they said that, here's my problem right here. I'm trying to get from point A to point B, right? But I can do that, or I have to do it in these 3 steps. Wouldn't it be great if I had this one? Youth banking is another thing that came up, that emerged, especially in Utah, because Mormons, which are numerous in Utah, obviously, tend to go on their missions when they reach the age of 18 or so abroad. So ability to move money internationally is very important to them. But it's a very unique need for sort of domestic financial services industry. Uh, so there are all these things that have come up out of those conversations that we simply were not aware of, simply because nobody, we haven't asked them that way before. We obviously conduct surveys, and we have a very active voice of the member program. But doing field studies and understanding how do you apply your strengths and your products and your services in new ways to cover your membership needs is invaluable.
Jay, there's something else that you talked about, which I thought was significant. You talked about onboarding new members with the bundle, and your conversion was 34.5% compared to, I heard you say 2%?
Yeah, the industry average is about 2 to 4%.
Can you talk to that, please, and also explain why you feel you're that much better?
Well, sure. So for the blended rate, and by blended rate meant is the average rate right across all of our products, right? So I took the conversion rate across all products and I averaged it down to about 34.5%. And what that means is that we throughout the years, online origination was always important to us. So we focused on this sort of the first level of, like, as I mentioned, the actual presentation layer. We were not satisfied with what our vendor provided, so we actually built our own. At that time, we couldn't find a vendor that would offer this level of experience. So we focused on experience, make sure that we removed as many friction points as possible, and achieved this higher throughput rate or conversion rate simply based on our focus on user experience. Now we have moved on beyond that into the second level of luck, in looking into back office processes and how data is managed, and robotic process automation, trying to automate as much backend processing as possible to alleviate further friction. So there's definitely a lot of when you invest into origination and onboarding, the payoff is huge, because for some credit unions, it may take days to complete this process. It may take actually going to a branch to get, to sign the documents and whatever it is. And today, in our day and age, people simply don't have time for that. Now, branches are going to continue to be important, right? It's, as I keep saying, that there's just a human social factor that's there, and the people will always need that human to human social validation for their decisions and advice. But when people want to onboard and just become a member and open an account, you have to make sure it's as easy as possible, as fast as possible, because we just, as a society, we don't have the bandwidth, the mental bandwidth to really deal with it for days on end. We just want it done, and end the journey in the digital banking platform and start using this account as fast as possible.
There's another thing that I really liked what you said, which you said is take your data, centralize your data, so your data is in one place, it's clean, and then rather than sifting through your data with humans, use machine learning and cognitive collaboration so you can understand the data and make and validate the decisions.
Absolutely.
How long have you been doing that?
We're kind of still in the early stages of that journey. Like most of our colleagues in the credit union industry, we inherited the legacy data structures from the 80s and the 90s with highly diverse database schemas. None of it would talk to each other. So we are just now starting that journey. We did a lot of research in terms of how to do this. We did attract a very capable leader in this space and gave him a team, and we are moving to figure this out, right? So uh, we always had data optimization efforts throughout the years, right? But now we're actually moving into data governance and centralization. Um, is it possible to centralize all the data? Ultimately, yes, right? And in the near term, probably no. It's just too much work, too much disruption to the business operations. But figuring out, that's why I mentioned you have to first start with what it is you need in terms of metrics, right? Figure out the 3 to 5 type KPI for each line of business, uh, and attack that way. Once you figure out what the business needs to operate, you can focus your efforts on what kind of data structure you need. And then from there flows the technology choices and all of that. So right now, we are still at the stages when we're figuring out, we have done the landscaping exercise across the entire organization, where all the data is stored, what kind of data is there, what the semantics of the data is, and are now trying to figure out, okay, what, basically where they, at the KPI stage, trying to figure out the next steps, right? Are we going to end up with a data warehouse or a data lake with all of it? We don't yet know. We might come up with more than one, but it's definitely going to be a lot less fragmented than it is now. And the ultimate goal of this journey is to, yes, end up with a centralized, centrally governed data structure that will provide the business with the insight that it needs.
Right. And this adheres perfectly to what you talked about earlier, which is that you're going to make internal knowledge management easier. Let people have access to information. Insight is important. So my question is now, it's actually a question of a lifetime, and we can debate about this for a long time. How do you compute lifetime value? And I'll share my little secret with you as well.
So we are actually don't. I've been wrestling with this for years, right? And we just simply do not have enough data to get this done, and it's been vexing me ever since I started. So I hope that in the next 2-3 years we'll actually manage to get that part figured out. Maybe hopefully sooner. I mean, but this pandemic, who knows? But it's something we're working on. It's something that everybody wants to know. Every single head of business wants to know what the LTV of their membership is. We implemented some foundational pieces to get that done. We're just not quite there yet.
Okay. So whenever I do a class or a workshop, I ask my students, and I may be sitting at your credit union, and I'll ask the leadership, I'll give them index cards. And on one side of the index card, I will tell them to put down what they think the value of a member is. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, I want them to write down all the reasons why. I do not want them to share the answer with each other. I want them to do it in private. And what startles me is I get answers from X to sometimes 50X with a lot of reasons. And right there we see we have a challenge. And the challenge is that if you gave somebody $1 and said, can you spend this $1? They don't know how to spend it because they don't know who they need to attract. So I think getting everybody on board is very important and trying to figure this out.
Absolutely. Any data transformation starts with the common set of definitions, right? You have to define what a member is. Right? How do you define a member? How do you count membership? How do you, what kind of natural segments exist within your membership? All that stuff needs to be defined, and everybody has to agree to it before you can truly start this process.
Right. Well, I want to say thank you to you, and to the audience, I want you to remember one key element that Jay spoke about. And basically, he said that even if you were a smaller financial institution, he talked about practical, pragmatic, and yet innovative steps on what does it take to have parity with a large financial institution, remembering that you don't need shiny objects, you don't chase them, and you don't need to offer everything they want, focus on what they need, take step by step, and work your path towards a successful journey. Jay, thank you so much again, and I look forward to another conversation.
Thank you, Sandeep. It's been my pleasure.